Trauma wasn't even in our vernacular, save for soldiers returning from war, until 9/11, when we experienced it collectively. The recovery community had begun to recognize that the chaos and fear instilled in us from growing up in an alcoholic family or living through sexual assault or physical abuse was like being at war. Personally, I realized that I needed to address the residual trauma in me to find my own healing and peace. That's what ultimately inspired the writing of the new chapter, Soothe Yourself, in this book. I'm grateful to have written it. While working on the revision, I also decided to come out about my codependency story. Because the people I was most codependent on were still alive back in 1986, I disguised them and myself. I felt I didn't have the right to tell their stories. I'm now including those stories here. I'm not doing it to speak ill of the deceased, but I'm no longer codependently covering for them either. We can lovingly and compassionately tell the truth about our experiences without demeaning others or ourselves. Another goal in the revision was to depathologize the writing, to separate people from their afflictions, labels, struggles, and illnesses. Many spectrums exist on which many of us land somewhere. Although much of the writing focuses on codependency triggered by someone's substance abuse, you'll also find stories and anecdotes that don't involve substance abuse. The recovery behaviors discussed in this book can apply to a wide range of codependency triggers. In this revised edition, I've also included an inclusive resources guide that's mindful of the many areas where people may need extra or urgent help. Kudos to Lauren Berrigan, who expertly assembled this section. The longer this lifetime goes, the more convinced I am that our primary responsibility in life is to find a way to make peace with ourselves, our past, and our present, no matter what we face and no matter how often we need to do that. It's also our job to mindfully practice self-love every day for all our lives. It's not a narcissistic or obnoxiously selfish attitude toward life and our relationships. Self-love is a humbler, quieter thing. You'll get used to it. I like it. You may too. On Valentine's Day 2022, I turned in the newly revised and updated Codependent No More. It's my legacy and long overdue gift to us as we move from the chaotic close of the past age and enter the age of Aquarius. May God bless this new edition. Introduction. My first encounter with codependence occurred in the early 60s. This was before people tormented by other people's behavior were called codependents, and before people addicted to alcohol and other drugs were labeled chemically dependent. Although I didn't know what codependents were, I usually knew who they were. As someone who struggled with alcoholism and addiction, I stormed through life helping create other codependents. Codependents were a necessary nuisance. They were hostile, controlling, manipulative, indirect, guilt-producing, difficult to communicate with, generally disagreeable, sometimes downright hateful, and a hindrance to my compulsion to get high. They hollered at me, hid my pills, made nasty faces at me, poured my alcohol down the sink, tried to keep me from getting more drugs, wanted to know why I was doing this to them, and asked what was wrong with me. But they were always there, ready to rescue me from self-created disasters. The codependents in my life didn't understand me, and the misunderstanding was mutual. I didn't understand me, and I didn't understand them. My first professional encounter with codependence occurred years later, in 1976. At that time in Minnesota, addicts and alcoholics had become chemically dependent. Their families and friends had become significant others, and I had become a recovering addict and alcoholic. By then, I also worked as a counselor in the chemical dependency field, that vast network of institutions, programs, and agencies that helps chemically dependent people.
No.